I think it is because some people can't see a new situation when it hits them. Frankly, think that if I read, as I did, the work of, say, Professor Chomsky, whose work in the past I've much admired, what he was basically saying is, oh, well, this is nothing new. It reminds me of another atrocity that the United States once committed in another country.
Sudan.
Yeah, in Sudan, in his case.
Right.
I thought, that's extraordinary. I thought the comparison was wrong morally.
Yeah.
But I also thought it was very lazy intellectually. It was as if to say, I already have my worldview, thanks all the same. Please don't disturb it. I was fine the way I was. I'm just, let me assimilate this to that, and then we'll move on. And I can go on saying what I was going to say in the first place. I find that boring and mediocre, because there's no doubt this is a new situation. It's no doubt this is a just war. There's a civil war in the Muslim world, an assault on Muslim civilization from the extreme right. The extreme right take the war to the West to try and win their war in the Muslim world.
Right, exactly.
That's a new situation. And it's really challenging. But Chomsky just shrug it off as contemptible. Then there's a better...
Because they're victims.
There's a better justification, which is some people are so upset by what they know about what American foreign policy has done in the past, in Palestine, for example, in Chile, in Guatemala, and so on, that they sort of can't believe the United States can ever be morally in the right. They're queasy. They don't want to be on the winning side with the Pentagon and the CIA.
This is because the United States has been, in your judgment, I mean, you know, and this is part of your own, you know, as I said, attacking American foreign policy, because the United States has associated itself with dictators in areas around the world who have repressed their own people.
More than associated with them, has imposed them, invented them, has imposed them on free peoples. Yes.
And therefore set down legitimate nationalism.
Oh, I mean...
In the name of anti-communism or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you could fill in anything under that heading that one might expect, and I would probably have phrased it more strongly. Yes, definitely, but that's this is an attack on American civilization, on civil society.
On civilization, period.
Yes, on civilization.
Because
period.
I mean, some 80 nations represented in those. But
since you mentioned American foreign policy, this is an attack on the bits of American civilization that are worth defending, that have taken a long time to evolve, that can't be abandoned. Free inquiry, separation of church and state, multi-ethnicity, all these things. It's a very deliberate assault of that kind. So you can't temporize about it. And that's why I liked what Blair did, particularly because, you know, quite a lot of my fellow Englishmen were killed in that explosion. I'm not quite sure what the numbers now are, but it was a lot.
Blair
didn't appeal, Blair didn't appeal to that at all. When he spoke at the Labour Party conference, he didn't say, by the way, a lot of Brits were killed too, so we should be interested. He didn't make any sectarian appeal. He didn't ask for it in national form.
No,
he just simply said,
he didn't say this is
our solidarity. It's solidarity.
Yeah, he did not say this was a
international solidarity, and both those words still mean quite a lot to me. I'm not a member of the faction of the Labour Party that particularly admires Tony Blair, but on this, I thought he was dead right.
I see two arguments out there against the war. One is the argument that it's not an argument, it's basically the position you've already alluded to, which is the notion that somehow America had asked for it by its conduct. That's one, which is obviously reprehensible. And the other is that America is not being judicious in its application of force. Those are the two. Are there more?
No, those are the two. The second has some force, because if we're going to say this is a fight for civilization, then to say, by the way, we'll fight it with mercenaries only.
Northern Alliance United Front. Yeah.
Say, or with flying machines that can't be seen or heard from the ground, which, as everyone knows who's studied B-52 pattern bombing, can lead to a lack of discrimination in what happens on that ground.
Sure.
There's something contemptible about that.
Okay, but why is that? Let me just explore that, because I think it's an interesting point. What is it? I mean, if you're fighting a war of which the stakes are as serious as they are, let's assume, you said earlier, in 2 years, perhaps, bin Laden's and allies might have overrun Pakistan and gained control of a nuclear arsenal, right?
They were on their way.
They have at least 9 to 10 nuclear weapons now, they say. Or it is said. All right. Why isn't everything necessary, almost, to defeat them appropriate and necessary?
Oh, I don't quarrel with it pragmatically.
I mean, and if it's B-52, so be it.
I don't, but the B-52s are not hitting that kind of position.
But if they were, so then is the question of efficiency or not?
I would have to say.
Is that all it is, efficiency?
I'd have to say largely. Look, Yes. I mean,
then maybe we say the military judge the efficiency of it.
The same is true of a cluster bomb. There's something unpleasant about a cluster bomb because of the way it functions. It is by design indiscriminate. One would hope that in a war for civilization you wouldn't have to rely on an indiscriminate weapon because the means are the ends. After all, as one points out firmly to the masochists and the pacifists at the moment, in the case of September 11, civilian casualties are the means as well as the end. The weapon is a plane full of civilians. The target is a building full of civilians. The means are the end.
Exactly.
Well, if we are to insist on that, and I think we should, then it doesn't cost us very much strategically, in my opinion, to say, well, one would hope this couldn't be said of any methods of ours. For the same reason I wouldn't torture any of the people of that gang that I could capture.
You wouldn't?
No, it's a bad practice, and it leads to inefficiency and incompetence. In the end, they end up beating the confession out of the wrong person because it's easier.
There are more ways that are more skillful ways to do it.
You want to have exquisite knowledge of what they know, so you're not going to get this by using cruelty and force. No, so I don't. There's no need for what one might call our cause or the cause to be disfigured by that kind of thing.
And what do you say to the fact that since history began, there have been, I hate this word, collateral damage. There have been non-combatants killed.
But that's true whatever weapons you use.
Sure.
So, and since I'm not a pacifist, I think only a pacifist can make that objection. Say, under no circumstances will you take another person's life or be responsible. No. That, I think, is an immoral position because it leaves other people to make the choices about who's going to die. You just exempt yourself.
Yeah. Do you find yourself in opposition to all terrorism?
To all terrorism?
Yes.
I find myself in opposition to the use of the word.
In other words, creating terror to achieve a political end, and terror primarily against civilians.
Well, if you define terror as the simple targeting of civilians, then it becomes a tautology. You can just simply say you're against it. Yeah, right. I've written a lot that I think terrorism is a useless word. It's been used now for too many. It's an old cheap suit that's been jammed onto too many frames.
Okay, well, choose your word, but I'm trying to get inside your head.
No, but this would be a way inside what remains in my cerebellum, which would be, I think terrorism is far too weak a word. It's too weak a condemnation of Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is a fascist organization that wants to bring dictatorship and theocracy by means of the blackmail of civilian casualties.
Here comes to
terrorism is a very weak word for that. Furthermore, it's a shady word because some regimes that we have not been proud of our friendship with have used it to describe any armed resistance by groups of civilians who are themselves being terrorized. So we need a new and proper term for each. I think it's quite right to describe this as theocratic fascism, let's say. In doing that, you understand much better what you're fighting against.